Keeping a diary and keeping a journal are two completely different activities. The diary allows for some reflection about what is happening in the course of your day, but is primarily a tool for saying, at this time I'm doing such and such an activity, at this time I will be engaged in a different activity, and that's your diary. It's for recording activity and incidents and things that you want to happen and things that are happening. The diary that you buy from a stationery store or the diary that you have in digital format on your phone or on your laptop, that's one particular format of structure and is more rigid so that there is the same pattern repeating and repeating week after week after week. A journal is different. I use a journal by Paperchase, which I get from one of their stationery stores near us in Leeds in Yorkshire. And I've just begun a new one, this aubergine version, which comes with an elastic strap to keep the book closed, and then also within it are some useful silk threads or page tabs, which I tend to use, one for the week that I'm in and the other to show the month that I'm in. Going back to these particular examples, the closing ribbon loses its elasticity, which is disappointing, but the books themselves are tremendous. They have more than 180 pages. I tend to get about 5 months in each of these books, and they're incredibly useful. I stopped buying physical diaries in stationery stores years ago because I found that what I needed was a blank page that I can tailor to my requirements as the person journaling and adding the entries to the book. So what I'm showing you here is my journal setup for this particular month. You can see that I've taken the first few pages, which are simply index pages, and I'm leaving those as they are. And what will happen is that as I go through the month, I may think, okay, here are 5 or 6 significant things. I want to record those at the front of the book in the pre-formatted index that Paperchase include within these particular notebooks, but the rest is tailored by me. So here you can see I'm setting up the first 2 pages, which gives me a monthly overview. I can see in one colour my days of the week, and in a different colour I'm setting out the weekends. I'm also adding a few themes that I want to focus on during the course of the month, and in this particular booklet you can see that I've written down details about family activity, YouTube activity, writing, and a few other activities. Having laid out the month, I then populate the pages to give me each of the weeks of the month with 2 pages per week, which is a good spread for me and allows me to have enough space to journal about activities on a given day, but also because I've got more space on that second page, I can add notes and ideas and prompts for what might be happening the following week, or allows me to summarize some of the activity for the week that's just happened. For example, on my journal pages, on a Sunday, I have some little markers that allow me to log subscriber count and hours watched on my 2 YouTube channels. One thing I really love about journaling is that it is so simple. You get to choose whether you use a little notebook like this. This one particular is a Leica notebook. I've handwritten the page numbers, but otherwise this is a plain booklet, A6 size. And I find it really useful. If I go to an example here, on the 22nd of May, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 themes which were relevant to me that day. On one of them, I'm making notes about a meeting I had in the city centre. It was quite important. It didn't go the way I wanted it to, but the outcome has been positive in the medium term. It wasn't a very good outcome on that particular day, but 2 weeks later I look back on that and I think actually that's worked out quite well. 2 more of the points from those 5 are about my YouTube activity and a frustration I'd been having with one of the videos. But then what I can also see on that particular day, which was the 22nd of May, I've made some notes about a video idea I have, and that might be something I can accomplish during the month of June, but I've got to take a lot of B-roll. So sometimes it's personal content about family and friends, other times it's information about my YouTube activity. And then the third main theme that recurs in this particular journal is thoughts about a manuscript that I'm working on. That's very different from my main journal. I don't write in this journal every day, probably 2, sometimes 3 times a week, and that seems to work really well. For me, there are 3 key aspects about journaling, and the first is that it is so simple. All you need is a notebook and a pen, and you're good to go. The quality of the notebook, the size of the notebook, whether it is lined or blank pages or graph paper, as in the case of these paper chase notebooks, where the pages at first glance appear blank, but then you see a very fine dotted line throughout the book, and it's easy to then adapt that for the requirements that I have. But then I can populate the pages by structuring them in the way that I want as 2 pages for a week. So I have those first 4 days of the week on the left-hand page, and then I have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a reminder of YouTube activity on the Sunday evening, and then the rest of the page, almost half the page, blank, for general thoughts about what might be happening the following week. The second thing I love about the journaling process is that you can structure the book the way that you want. For example, you could take a blank notebook like this one, and you could create it so that instead of having a 1-month spread over 2 pages, you could have 2 columns on 1 page for the first 15 and the second 15 or so days of a given month. You could set up each week so that you had 1 week on every page as you go through the book, or you could take a version like I've done it with a 2-page spread for a whole week. There is so much flexibility. You could add notes at the end of every week and then miss a few pages and start week 2 or week 3 and go through that process. But the idea is that you can tailor it and make it your own process. And for me, that flexibility of structure when you're setting up your journal is so important. But the most important is the third reason or benefit that I find associated with creating my own journal every month is that it is an analog process. For me, the best way to capture ideas is not in a digital way on a MacBook or an Alpha Smart Neo or my iPad. It's to grab a pad of paper and make my notes like I have for this video and work from those notes in an analog physical process. For me, the idea of putting pen to paper and working on the process of making my journal notes or creating my journal, setting up my journal, for me, it's about the quality of the pen in my hand and the paper that I'm writing with. So, for example, this spiral bound notebook is really flimsy, 60-gram paper. In this Leica A6 notebook, I'm working with really nice, quite thick 90-gram paper. And I'm using a fine ballpoint pen. This one's a cross-century pen. But I could be using a fine-nibbed Faber-Castell pen or a Staedtler 0.3, 0.4 felt pen to write in my journal. And I'll choose the pens according to the mood that I'm in, how I feel about the topic. For example, this is a financial journal I use. It's a moleskin booklet. This one's a Davis Polk reference. But for this notebook, which tends to be around personal finance, so I use it for, this is a list of stocks, their dividends, and the rankings I might want to give them in my portfolio. But I'll also in here record Amazon activity, Skillshare activity, and rental activity, so that this book has a standalone theme. This contains lots of detail about those topics. And into this journal, I would simply write down the rental income that comes in. But here, it would be details around particular tenant, investment stocks, and like I've said, activity with Amazon and Skillshare. But each one of these has a different quality of paper, a different style of paper, and you can get as fancy and as overblown in the way that you approach journaling as you want. It is so much about the pen in your hand and the quality of the paper that you're working with, and also the movement of your hand across the paper as you're writing. And that is something that I cannot get from using a note app on my phone or opening a document in my laptop. A freely structured, personally designed and put together journal format for me is the best way to capture my ideas about those things which happen. But because I'm predominantly working on creative processes, creative activities, having the simple process of pen and paper and working through that in a journal allows you to capture a sense of where you are right now and where you might want to go with your ideas and your activities, but also to put ink on paper and capture your feelings and reflections on how you are responding to those actions in front of you and the activities that you're getting involved with. So journal, because it's a simple process. You can start it with any form of pen and paper. The second benefit I talked about is that you can journal in a style that is relevant to your needs, but also matches your character and how you want to capture and express your thoughts and reflections. And the third reason to take up journaling is because it gets you away from screen time. It allows you to be in a non-digital world where you are dealing with pen and paper and good quality materials, but capturing those things in a fine, practical, aesthetic manner, as opposed to typing up words on a screen and saving them in a digital format. Might it sometimes be difficult to go back to your notebooks and find something you were looking for? Possibly, yes. But I think that because you are putting your focus into a non-digital pen on paper format, you are actually storing away that material which you're putting down in writing, and you will find it quite quickly. Going back to the setup of this type of journal, which I like to use, remember that you have several pages open at the beginning of the book for indexing things that happen, for activities that you want to almost put a marker onto because they're important or significant, or they may have future relevance. In actual fact, you record data that way, and so instead of having to flip through 4 or 5 months worth of entries, you can actually just look at the index section, and that may give you the answers that you're looking for. I hope this has given you enough reasons to consider starting journaling this month or next month, to sticking with it for at least a calendar month, and then looking back on the process to say, what benefits did I get? How do I feel about the tactile, aesthetic process of journaling? Does it allow me to capture my thoughts and feelings in a way that is different from how I may have been doing it in a physical, more defined or rigid structure commercial diary that I've bought from a stationery store? And going forward, how might I like to move from a fairly simple, basic biro and spiral bound notebook into something that is more beautiful, more elegant? If your first month experiment of journaling goes really well and you move from a basic notebook to something that is perhaps more visually attractive, or where the quality of the paper is higher, this can become a really enjoyable hobby and part of your day where you take some morning time to add thoughts to pages after you've slept, and or where you make evening entries in the journal before you sleep. However you decide to move forward with this journaling activity, I'm sure you'll find it really enjoyable, and it can be such a great expressive outlet for your thoughts and ideas. Wherever you are, happy writing and happy journaling.